Welcome to another episode of V's Perspective. As we have hit a strategic pause in the escalation between India and Pakistan, I think it is important to reflect on some of the strategic clarity that may have um, come to India as a result of this unprecedented conflict. It is important to assess great power role, uh, the role of United States, China, and other powers, which actually played some key role in achieving a de-escalation of sorts. The second is what kind of strategic clarity does India have? I think let's start from India. One is, of course, the domination that we saw in the skies, and particularly the missile forces of India and the missile. And the attacks by the UAV, which is the unmanned aerial vehicle, drones, etc., was really hallmarked the arrival of a new age of combat. I think we were seeing some of this unfold in other parts of the world, for example, Ukraine and the Middle East. But I think um, the fact that the aerial defense of India really stood the test of the time and actually performed really well in terms of um, stopping almost all the drone attacks, the barrage of drone attacks, I think speaks a lot about aerial defense and the capability. Also points to areas where India needs to strategically augment its capacity and capability, and one of that area is, of course, apart from the conventional forces, your missile capabilities and your aerial defense. The second is the nature of this conflict was different from the past India-Pakistan conflict in the sense that we didn't see much ground mobilization, and actually much was dealt in the air, and use of missiles which is unprecedented. For example, India used the BrahMos missile possibly to target the one of the bases, and taking out one of the terrorist uh, houses and madrasa in the initial salvo. I think that's quite unprecedented in many ways, and the use of and the possible use of missile which was intercepted over Hisar in Haryana by Pakistan, which was intercepted by India. I think those are remarkably new moments in aerial combat, particularly between India and Pakistan. So that's a great takeaway for the strategic forces, for the armed forces, in terms of where we are headed next. The second is, of course, the possibility that um, India may have that Pakistan may have moved its strategic forces in a response to its 9 or 10 or 11 bases being lit up by Indian Air Force. Now, I think that's the brinkmanship of Pakistan was possibly tested, but I think this rabbit dog theory of nuclear brinkmanship has not been tested to its finality. And I think there is some scope there in terms of where in the next escalatory cycle India will keep its foot. And I think that's important in terms of taking that escalatory cycle, as unfortunate as it may be. But I think that remains, there is still some degree of operational space to push and in fact counter that those moves by Pakistan, because that then that makes India, you know, as a country which dominates the escalation but cannot take it to a certain degree of finality. So that is my second point. The third is the role of certain countries became very clear, and I think it's in the overall scheme of geopolitics that today India stands at. I think it's important to have that clarity. The role of China, the role of Azerbaijan, and role of Turkey. I think these three countries have been segregated in the Indian cognitive psyche, in the Indian geopolitical cognitive psyche, because of their open support to Pakistan in the context of a conflict that is unraveling, and that is more remarkable than anything else. I think you saw statements from China backing Pakistan. You saw ammunitions used by Pakistan which was supported and given to Pakistan by China. So you saw a concrete, real time help by China as well as Turkey. I think there were some reports about Turkish drones being used by Pakistan against India, and I think it's important to put in the broader context of what uh, the bilateral relationship should mean henceforth for India, for all these three countries. Of course, there's an effort to create an Islamic axis by Turkey, which in its deranged fantasy thinks that there's an Islamic Ummah to be created by creating an axis across Islamic countries, and how that narrative has to be taken forward. The third is, of course, the role of the United States. I think, um, as I uh, as I have written before, that the operational space uh, to provided to India by the initial nonchalance and even distancing of the United States from this conflict provided India the operational space, but may not have sustained, but that space may not have sustained for the amount of time that India actually needed to at least sustain this escalation dominance to up to a certain point, which would be cost inflicting on Pakistan, um, much more than it is currently. And I think those three factors are important in the overall scheme of things, in terms of geopolitics, vis-a-vis countries, in terms of great power role, and how um, and how some of these countries were critical in terms of providing India a strategic clarity in terms of how to go forward, and not always in a positive way. Thank you.